Hey everybody, I'm Anne-Christine Diaz, the creativity editor at Ad Age. Welcome. We are kicking off our Future of Creativity event this week, and I'd like to call in my partners in crime, our associate creativity editors, Ishan Shorewood from New York and Alex Jardine from the UK in London. Hey guys.
Hey.
Hey. So this week, we're really excited today. What we have planned is an A-list roundtable with the leaders of some of our big winners from Ad Age's agency A-list. And we also have a chat with the leaders of Saturday Morning. And this afternoon, we are presenting, finally, our Creativity Awards. So we were meant to have our big gala in March or April, but of course, the pandemic put that on hold. But we still wanted to honor all the winners of the brilliant work that gave us a lot to write about last year. So you guys excited for today?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm excited to finally be like, good job in 2019. You did a lot of really good stuff. I like that you asked us to make our own trophies, so I hope all the winners also make their own trophies at home. I think that'll be fun.
So they have about 3 hours or actually
Get to it.
Yeah. So this week we're talking about the future of creativity, and while the awards celebrate what's happened in the past, we're also going to look to the future. I think a lot of us have a lot on our minds right now. It's a really heavy time. We are still going through the pandemic, and now we are dealing with all the racial unrest that has affected the U.S. and all around the world, people all around the world. So we are going to be talking to a lot of agency leaders and rising leaders on how they are dealing with that. And we're also going to take a look at the work, which we're really excited about, and do deep dives on that. So before we start, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Verizon Media, and our supporting sponsors, Ad Council, the Female Quotient, the It Gets Better Project, and the Miami Ad School. So we're going to say goodbye to Ishan and Alex and bring our first guests for today. Bye, guys. So we have David Droga, who is the founder and creative chairman of Droga 5, which was our agency of the decade. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Very early for you.
Yes, very early. And we have Colleen DeCourcy, who's the global chief creative officer of Wieden+Kennedy, our back-to-back-to-back agency of the year. And we have Rick Brim, chief creative officer at adam&eveDDB, which was our international agency of the year.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Hi guys. Oh, good afternoon.
Is it dinner yet?
It's not dinner yet.
You can drink now. We can't.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
We should just go with the latest time zone.
Shots before
that. So we've gathered you guys here today because your agency's work and your leadership, you've continued to set the bar for the industry, and you've continued to make a lot of other agencies jealous, probably each other. You're probably jealous of each other too, with the work that you've put out. And you've all done it consistently, even as you've grown bigger, you've undergone changes, an acquisition, or becoming part of a holding company. So we wanted to talk to you mostly about leadership through all of that, through growth and through change, especially since we're going through such tough times, unprecedented times, in which the industry has had to change a lot and very quickly. First the pandemic, and now with what's going on right now in terms of all the racial unrest around the world. So not to start off so deep, but let's kick it off with what's keeping you guys up at night these days in terms of work and the job.
Oh.
David, you want to start?
Do you want me to start, did you say? Sorry.
You going first, David? Okay.
All right. I mean, there are so many things keeping us up at night, I'm sure, and there's lots of parallels between all of us, but it's, our reality's changed weekly. I feel like it's almost like we're in dog years now, where, 1 week, the sentiment of an agency mood, a client mood, societal mood, they're changing so rapidly, and we're trying to keep up at the same time we're trying to stay ahead of things. So it's beyond the, your flattering introduction of the three different agencies. There's things that we've tried to stay consistent with from day one, in good times or bad times. And I think your thing about leadership is it's only really tested when it's under duress, right? Anyone can be a great leader when things are easy or good. It's when there's change put in front of you or you're tested that you can actually see what you stand for and the principles of that. And it kind of works when you've got a good team around you and you've got principles. And it's pretty simple principles to remember if it's about the work and it's about the people. But there are new realities which have completely bombarded us, not just geographic ones and health ones with the pandemic, which has made us all in a new reality as far as is our work and is our culture and is our creativity, does it travel, is it mobile? And then there's the sort of the volcano which has finally erupted appropriately, which is, what's going on with the sort of the racial conversations and, as you said, it's global. And that's something that has exposed everybody and everybody's, particularly leaders. We've all been called bullshit on ourselves. It's sort of exposed the realities between our good intentions and the realities of what's necessary and where we are in that process. And no matter how far along we all thought we were, and I can't speak for anyone else, I thought we were, we're making good progress. You realize you're not. And then it goes back to the thing about leadership and culture. So there's lots of, I'm trying to answer all those different disparate things, but there's lots of things keeping us awake. And it's, how do you stay true to what we're doing and the power of our creativity and servicing our culture and our people, but acknowledging what's going on in the world. Like we can't stick our head in the sand and pretend that the world hasn't changed drastically. And some of it certainly for the better, and some of it is, when it talks to health, they're the unknowns. But that's sort of a bit of a level, sorry.
I mean, we're gonna try to touch more deeply on all these things in the conversation. But Colleen, so what's keeping you up?
Yeah, I mean, all the same things. I mean, I think those are the immutable truths. But I think there are two things that keep me ruminating all night to the point where I'm not sleeping well. One of them is that, Wieden+Kennedy has always prided itself on, completing Dan's mission of having an agency that looked the same as the composite makeup of people in the world that it operated in. And we're not there. And that keeps me awake. Why? I looked at that list of 12 asks, and I would say by and large, most of them I would just say yes to today. And so why did it take the list? And why can we make work to represent, Black and brown men and women in the world and not actually have that same makeup inside the company to the degree that we would like to? I like to think that we're doing better than some, but I don't think we're doing as well as we could. So that bothers me a lot. To David's point, it's kind of a self reckoning, and then there's really no time to give much of a shit about how I feel about it. It's how everybody in the agency feels about it. And that really leads to the second thing, which is while all this is happening in an agency that pins absolutely everything from our success to our failures to our happiness to our children to our, on the culture that we create inside the agency, not being able to see people, not being able to touch people, not being able to be in one place, to show up, to notice someone's mood, to pull everyone into the atrium and say, wow, like, can we just have a talk for a second? All of that's missing. And so in the very moment when I feel the need the most to touch all of the people that work in our agency, I'm having to do it like this over video, and it just does not suffice. And that keeps me awake.
Mm.
So Rick, does the John Lewis Christmas ad still keep you up at night right now? what do you...
There's a context, and I think whilst my thing throughout the whole of this has been about the people and the people that we aren't getting to see. And my biggest thing is the only thing that keeps me sane for many years is wanting to create a culture and a company that people feel insanely proud to be part of. And And the only thing that sounds so simplistic, but with that comes in, they feel insanely proud of the work we're doing and how we're pushing things forward, and if we're pushing things forward. But more so, they're insanely proud to come in and our values and what we stand for, and that has been questioned. That has been put into question, and that hurts me so deeply, because it just hurts. It really, really hurts, and it's not for me to hurt. It's not for me to sit here saying it hurts, but we have got a lot of work to be doing to get back to that day where people walk in with that pride and that sort of about working with us. And my thing personally, that what I'm finding is my thing is energy and the personal touch and the bouncing around, and have you heard about this, and how can we do this, and I'm really feeling that, because I think energy is one of the greatest tools we have, and people feed off energy, and anything can be solved through energy and talking and thinking and creativity, and just being behind this glass screen all day, still trying to muster that energy, it's tough, and that's what keeps me up, because there's so many things that need fixing, and there's so many things that need challenging, and there's so many things that need to be readdressed and looked at and really sort of rebuilt, and whilst one side it's incredibly exciting, in the other side it's incredibly frustrating, because we're trying to adapt to this way of working, which I'm finding so tough, because I just want to, as Colleen said, be there sort of, do you know what I mean? And that's the bit I find the hardest, but that's what's keeping me up. But thinking, yeah, that we're not there yet, and I want this place to be some that people are insanely proud to work.
So I want to go back to to kind of the beginning from the pandemic, when everyone was required to shift their ways of working. What did you guys find were the biggest struggles during the past 3 months? And, what did that show you about your agency, perhaps where you needed to evolve a little bit or grow? Or, what did that show, like, oh, wow, we're awesome. It doesn't matter. We don't need to be in the same room to do something. So David.
Well, I think it's interesting, because I think on paper, I was relieved and surprised right from the get-go that it didn't change our ability to ideate and stuff like that. You know what I mean? As I said, we are very much a mobile industry. We take our brains and our imaginations with us. But to Rich's point, we're also, creativity is not a linear thing. It's a collision culture. You know what I mean? And it's the disagreements, laughing, crying, calling bullshit on each other in the corridors, dipping in and out of things, that makes things take on these different lateral thoughts. And I feel like that's the thing that is missed very much. I feel like I've been so proud of it sticking together culturally. They still do all our culture nights and music nights and people checking in on each other and all these things. But it is weird, because it is still, as I said, virtually. I think the thing that was lost on me is that most of the people in all these situations, not just our industry, but in all the corporations, the people that are making the decision about how to work and is it working and when's the time to go back, are all the people who are in nice houses, places, and the people that are most desperate to get back to work. If I think of just selfishly, if the people in my office in New York City, if you're a young guy or girl in New York City, like, you tolerate having a shitty apartment and a flatmate that you don't really like because you're in New York City and you go to work and you get to experience the whole city. Suddenly, when you're forced to go back to your crappy apartment and realize your flatmate's a jerk and none of you can eat any, like, they're the ones desperate to get back. And a lot of the other people who are sort of in these farms or whatever it is. So it's kind of this weird thing, but I'm like Rich and Colin, I miss and it's not just about the creativity, it's also to talk about the bigger issues at hand now. Like, we need to call each other. We need to sort of cry and hug and pull it apart and put it back together again in person. Like, we are not a linear industry. And so I'm very proud of our culture that it's weathered this, but I don't like how far it's being stretched. particularly at this time, to address what needs to be addressed even more so now than in the past.
Colleen, what about you?
Yeah, it's, you know, we have been talking about change in the industry for a long time. At Wieden+Kennedy in particular, we've been really, we reached this moment probably about 5 years ago, where honestly, there were moments that we thought if we had to listen to one more Wieden+Kennedy manifesto, we would shut our doors and walk away. So there's been this thing, you know, Susan Hoffman's always like, at the end of every brief is don't make an ad. And she doesn't mean don't make something that happens on film or on broadcast or on television. It's just like, don't make an ad. And there are hallmarks to an ad. And I think we'd hit this, you know, kind of Hollywood blockbuster era of the industry. And all the change we were trying to make, the ways we were trying to pull ourselves away from the things that, quite honestly, you know, return for us. It's hard to make people stop doing something that's working for them. COVID just took that all away. It took away the tools. It took us back to our instincts. It took us away from some of our processes that we believed were actually how the work gets made, but they weren't. It just all these changes that were happening. It almost just went away. The idea of, you know, let's change. It's like everything changed. So we've been walked back. We're walked back to the fundamentals. We're walked back to the way it was in the beginning. We're brought back to a time when we're trying to figure out, with just a great idea, a little bit of money, not much time, the right people, can we say something that the world cares about? So of all the really rough things that have happened, and weirdly, I think I should probably be more afraid for my business, and yet weirdly I'm not. I kind of have the faith that all these things are reshaping because they need to, because it's good, because we'll be fine. So I'm kind of been excited about what it's done in terms of redefining what it takes to get an idea out into the world. You know, a fact that nobody needs to have said is that a lot of people are making things, making ideas that the rest of the world cares about that are not professionals. And it behooves us to figure out how to get that energy back. And I'm feeling it, you know, being nimble, being smart, being creative, being original, being timely. That's the gift that COVID has given us. Those are the changes that I saw. I wasn't surprised that people could work distantly. I was surprised at just how scrappy we could get with our ideas. And that's been one of the good things.
Rick,
yeah, I echo that, because I was describing it to somebody a couple of days ago, and it felt like I'm not a big roller coaster fan, and it felt like I'd been talked onto a roller coaster, and I don't know. We have to go on the road. So you're on this roller coaster. You're like, I quite like this. This is. Oh yeah, I like roller coasters now, and I've gone round. I'm like, wait, okay, and then you're like, okay, I need to get off now. And then I really need to get off now, I'm going to be sick. And then you're sick, and then you carry on going around. And that's how it felt. But then there's this sense of excitement that comes back of, I really think, as Colleen said, the industry has been talking about change, and the industry, but we had too much stuff, and we had all the toys, and we had all and I've really enjoyed the scrappiness. I've really enjoyed the art schoolness. I've really enjoyed the crazy little phone calls. Like, if we don't get this out now, what about doing the like the reactionary stuff? And I've been really impressed with the way people have sort of discarded everything, discarded what they knew, and embraced this this new way of working. That's not to say this is how I want to, which is the roller coaster thing, because I don't want to go on another roller coaster. I don't want this to continue. I want to get back, and I want to be with people again, because it is a collision business, but I want it to be a lot more art schooling. And what I mean by that is it can be anything, and we don't need all the bells and all the whistles to be able to create great stuff. Sometimes they help, but you don't need them.
I want to go back to you talked about scrappiness, Colleen, and we saw a lot of scrappiness through the pandemic, and in that scrappiness we saw a lot of people coming up with the same kinds of ads.
Sure.
And you hear these stories about agencies pitching their client one idea, and then they see the idea come out the next day from somebody else, and then you see you probably saw that all the parodies, the satires.
Of course, we were in most of them.
Yeah, exactly. One of the most popular ones, and you guys all have ads that appear in that. What did you think about that? In terms of what has to change, or was that just a natural thing to happen that would have happened?
I think it would. David and I have talked about this. It was this perfect confluence of a bunch of things. All the tools that are taken away except for 3. Here's motion. Here's some type. Here's some stills. We are trained to truly kind of tap what's going on in culture. It's a business. If you're doing it right, it's a business of being a bit of an empath, distilling that and deciding what people need to hear. And so you had this pain, you had this fear, you had these 3 tools, and as an empath, you're like, what do people need to hear? And I really do. There was a lot of bitching and moaning about, oh God, another one. And I don't really think it went on that long when you assume it was sort of like maybe a month to 6 weeks that all these things came out. And I think we were all responding to the basic human need to hear something positive. And so I think more that's our creators' minds that did that. It is nice, though, to see that we figured out how to get past it. But I think it was natural. I don't think it's a sign that the industry's ill. I think it's the sign that we kind of still have these antennae.
Yeah. I was incredibly relieved, and I was incredibly relieved when Facebook came out with theirs, because we just put one out in the UK, and then Facebook came out with theirs, and we're like, okay, well that's it, because I thought the Facebook one was great, and no one's going to beat it.
The spoken word one, or the
Kate Tempest. That was just genius. That use of her.
I just thought, okay, that's brilliant. Okay, now that's done, and that's done so well. We're over it. And then certainly here, and then the parody came out the week later, and then certainly here. I mean, I think we're still maybe pushing one out. Here or
it
there,
is self-indulgent though to think more of our own work than what the public's going through in a moment. I think that's I felt bad about that discussion.
So what did you have any of those experiences where you were about to put out this ad, and then, for example, you see the Facebook one, and it's like, what happens at that sort of moment? Do you change course? You just go with it?
I think to Colleen's point, like everyone was operating under duress and at pace. And also in the very beginning, no one knew what was solid ground, from clients to agencies. They were trying to work out like what was the proper tone, and we also needed to communicate. So on one level, the parody films that came out taking the piss out of all the brand films, it kind of annoyed me a little bit, because part of me was thinking, well, look, we're just trying to stay relevant. We're trying to keep people in jobs. We're trying to put messaging out there for our clients. So, but I feel like, to Colleen's point, I'm very glad that we pushed through that, because even the consumers were the first to tell brands, they're like, stop telling us that you're with us. Stop telling us you've got our back. Stop telling us that we're in this together. Like, it was very much, everyone went to practical, which was, what are you going to do for me, or shut up? You know what I mean? And that was great from a creative thing. And the scrappiness thing, to everyone's point, I mean, look at the creativity that is coming out beyond commercially. It's incredible. There's some amazing stuff. And, I said this to someone else before, like, beyond the essential workers and the health workers, like, thank God for the creative people out in the universe who've made us laugh and cry and do all these different things, because there's some really thought-provoking stuff. And I'm not just talking about the films that go out there and stuff like that. I'm talking about the creativity of, the mayor of DC changing the plaza name to Black Lives Matter. Like, there's just amazing ideas and things happening out there, finding a way. And that is what creativity is, really, isn't it? With its limitations, it finds a different outlet. And our industry is at its best when it does that, and so is society. And so I like the pace of change that's happening.
You know what I really loved about that piece, and you said it when you talked about the, for me, put the needle in the Black Lives Matter that went down from the mayor, is that in that moment, the genius of that piece, and I think your specific genius as a creative, is you didn't use the tools of the edit any differently, but when everyone else was going into pacifying aphorisms, you know, we're together, we're with you, you know, we got this, all this stuff, to calm, you took the tools that were available and then you just threw some like fire, some lighter fluid on it. You know, Kate Tempest is a raging humanist. You know, if you listen to the words of that piece, they are not calming, but they are incredibly beautiful. And I think that's the art of it, you know. I think that's why the artists have been useful right now, to your point. It's the not quelling, it's the firing up, and planting a reason why in people. It was a beautiful example of that. I went home and cried, David. I really did.
I think the people don't want to hear from voiceover artists. They don't want to hear from irrelevant celebrities who have no context to what they're talking about. People want to hear from humanity. You know, that people want to hear from Kate Tempest because she's a real poet. There's angst and humanity in that. People want to watch the Chappelle special because it's like on point. You know, like there isn't time for things that are too perfectly crafted and engineered mediocrity. You know what I mean? It's sort of like there isn't that kind of, it's authenticity and sincerity count now more than ever.
You guys are kind of referencing the talents that are out there in the world in a way, you know, with the DC mayor and then Kate Tempest. It just kind of brings to mind these questions from the audience that are asking about, you know, the future of recruitment. You know, what makes for a great young creative hire? That's from Jimmy on Twitter, and Anthony on LinkedIn is asking what I would really love to hear what the future of recruitment looks like. So in your mind, having gone through all this, what does that look like?
Who are you asking that? Are you going to?
Let's go to Rick.
Go to Rick.
For me, recruitment is all about, and somebody said this to me years ago, and I think it still stands true. It's somebody you want to be in a really shitty situation at 3 o'clock in the morning with, and having those moments of is this right? No, it's not. No, that just constantly questioning to move things forward, and that for me has always been the same. And I don't think it changes personally. I very rarely hire on sort of advertising books. I hire on sort of souls, and without getting too sort of, but like spirits, and some of the best people I work with, it's their being that inspire that I enjoy working with, and they just so happen to be good as well. But for me, it's about showing that at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we've got a really tricky problem, that it's the conversation's still going to be interesting.
Have you been?
And I don't think that. Sorry.
You've been able to do that over Zoom? Are you doing any hiring right now? And what's that like in this current time of being in these boxes?
I think there's no hiring going on because we do. I think we're just all sort of clinging, but there's definitely conversations, and there's definitely. I mean, I just quite like meeting people and shooting the shit with people and discussing and arguing, and you know, so there's definitely been that going on. But it's strange. It's like I've never liked Skype interviews. I've never liked this sort of thing, because you've got to see the whites of people's eyes and to really get into it. But yeah, I've tried to carry on meeting as many interesting people as I can through this, because I think it scares me that there's some great talent out there, and so it helps me push me forward and bring them on. Yeah. but not obviously as you are when you're in the physical world.
David, what about you?
I think the thing, beyond the normal tenets of it, the curious and the creative and the people who are actually interested in the ramifications of their creativity, like that's a given. I feel like now, because we ask them to insert themselves into so many different parts of society. I think we've been quite fortunate. We've hired about 20 or 30 people in this since the pandemic's been going, which I always find like such a weird thing, that there's new people who are into our company that have never been set foot in our office, and they finished a job in their living room and they started a new job in their living room. I'm like, that's so weird. But I think the big change, particularly, which has shed light just in recent time, we've just got to stop hiring from the same places. We can try and hire the same sort of mindset and ambition, all that stuff, but just going for the same well all the time. And it's, we started our own ad school, like night school, 3 or 4 years ago, called D5 and 10, which was just to get people from communities that we weren't talking to or weren't even exposed to advertising, more diversity. I mean, it's so weird because for me, for so long, my shtick was, I used to always think that it was such an unlikely, my story of how I got to New York was so unlikely. This kid who grew up in the middle of a national park and found his way through Asia to and I was, like really fought to get into the industry. And I was like, actually, it wasn't that unlikely. I was still a white privileged male from an English speaking country. So that's not that unlikely. There are people in the Bronx, it is more unlikely that they'll make it to Manhattan to work in advertising. So we need to find people there that don't know that it's an option, who are going to have all the scrappiness and all the humanity that our industry needs, but a different perspective that will expand it. And that's where our industry is going to get. I mean, again, we can't call ourselves a creative industry if we don't expand that. And, we've been trying to do that for years. We obviously haven't done it fast enough, and we need to accelerate that. But
yeah, sorry. Oh, Colleen, did you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I know all the things that I'm supposed to say, and it's interesting what I feel about the recruitment right now. It's just, my mind's been kind of blown open by this alignment of events that have nothing to do with the line on diversity in advertising, because we have a shit historical record, period. It was easy to keep letting it slide weirdly, and people did. But when you take this idea of COVID, what I was just saying, whereas it showed what was really necessary and what wasn't, and it took away the tools that we would normally use. And what's the most often excuse I hear about why, the same freaking people get hired over and over? It's experience. Talent isn't experience. The tools are what you need experience for. So fuck experience. Tools are gone. And when I looked at, you mentioned the Chappelle special, but just when I got there and I landed on it and I looked at his description, and it just said everything to me about what's going on right now. And it said, normally I wouldn't show something so unrefined. I hope you understand. And I did. And I thought, okay, so we have faster, cheaper, no tools. All that matters is the talent and the ideas, the raw emotion of what's going on in the world. And if we say that we're at our best in the eye of this cultural storm, if advertising pretends to have anything to do with culture, in the way that COVID didn't change the world, people talked about how it accelerated the changes that were happening. This is the one. This is the one that all of a sudden there are zero excuses. And so I think we really just have to commit to, you're right, and I don't fucking know what happened, and yes, and we will hire you, and you should be promoted, and we will figure this out, and we will figure it out fast. Because quite frankly, I don't think anybody wants to see our work anymore. I can't look at and try and approve one more, dumb dad joke. No offense to any dads on the, it's just like, I want to hear this raw thing, and that's where it is. So even the most selfish business person in advertising right now has zero excuse, because this is just what has to happen. And I'm so excited about that. that's how it's kind of changing our perspective anyway.
So I'm Anne-Christine Diaz, a creativity editor at Ad Age. I'm here with the members of our A-list roundtable, David Droga, founder and creative chairman of our agency of the decade, Droga 5, Colleen DeCourcy, global chief creative officer of our agency of the year, Wieden+Kennedy, and Rick Brim, who's the chief creative officer of adam&eveDDB. So we're here talking about the future of creativity, and we're just talking about talent. So what you guys were discussing just now, in terms of what's going on, David, you talked about programs, for example, where you've brought in creatives or promising talents who may not have gotten a foot in the door before. And a lot of the industry has been doing a good job of, bringing in talents. But I think one of the big problems is how to keep the talent there and how to keep nurturing them until they evolve to positions like you guys. One of the problems, like somebody could look at this roundtable right here and see the lack of diversity. And one of the issues at the heart of that is just keeping the talent on and making sure that they stay on and that they grow. So I know that's like a tough question, but have you talked about plans on how to do that? What are the long-term plans to ensure that? David.
Well, I mean, it's such a truth in that question, because we've talked a lot about that in our office, because even when we feel like we're heading in the right way, anytime we lose anybody that we feel was one of us and we were moving up, there's obviously got to be something that we weren't getting, we weren't understanding. And obviously our culture is as inclusive as we thought it was. There were some things that just weren't inclusive enough that we have to address, and we spent a lot of time trying to investigate and discover what it is, and we have a very open forum. And we also I think we got from Colleen from Wieden, we also got lots of conversations to the whole agency, from Glenn, courageous conversations to just really make it not just some agenda on a memo and stuff like that, but to see what we don't see. What aren't we getting? What is our privilege not let us understand about our office environment? And by no means do I pretend that we've solved that. The fact that we are pushing hard to try and solve that, and we need to go faster, as I said. But you're right, like we need to retain the talent, because it's not just a percentage thing and it's also not a numbers thing. It's also what positions they are, and positions of power and authority. And it's it's funny because my wife, who's family, her father is black and her mother is Hispanic, and I was talking to her brother the other day about all this, and I was talking about my office, and he was also talking about society. He goes, "You guys are just so busy being white that you have no idea what's going on." You kind of miss it. Your attention is only brought into it when sort of things explode. He said, but you need to be on it. It's not exploding. And it's true. Like, that's the whole thing. We constantly dip in and out of things because we're too busy being, I wouldn't say too busy being white, but too busy getting on with our daily lives. And these things are constant. So we need to address it, but we're prepared to go to the bone to course correct it. Not only because it's the right thing to do, which it certainly is, it's also better for what we stand for. As if we are a creative industry, that we have to, for the survival of our industry, to put the best work out there. But that also means we've got to just bring in more people in our industry, because we can't constantly just take from each other and move the best talent around. There's got to be more.
Rick, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think my thoughts on this are the one thing that's going to come out of this COVID time that we live in is change. And what I don't want to, I spent the last, you asked the question at the beginning, what keeps me up? I've spent the last sort of couple of weeks really looking at every single touch point and every single, almost like a customer journey through the agency, and really addressing absolutely every single aspect and of the system, and how, what can be changed, and what needs to be changed, and what needs to be broken down and started again. And we've been through a range of emotions, and now I'm kind of excited, which is why I'm so frustrated not to be with people, because we need to address everything from where we find our talent to how our talent is nurtured within and how it's promoted, and how everything needs to be addressed. And it doesn't need to be a tokenistic, oh, we're doing this, or we have this initiative or that. I think it needs to be a day by day by day by day, little dent. I think we need to make sweeping change, but I don't want it to be a thing. I want it to be a truly meaningful step. Just move. We have to move forwards, because to David and Colleen's point, this is where the most interesting work happens. That's what's exciting about it. And the sadness is that it took something like this.
Colleen, what about you?
To snap us out of our daily life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have something just really short, and it's not fully formed, but it's a thing. Once it struck me, I couldn't stop thinking it. There is something wonderful in being welcoming, and of course everybody needs to feel they can operate as themselves and their best selves in a space to want to be there. But the more I think about white middle-aged executives trying to create spaces that people that aren't like them will want to be in, I just keep coming back to the same answer, which is, if you want people to want to stay in the space they're in, give them the space, give over the space, give over the culture. Make sure that there's the critical mass number of people. Make sure that the things they care about are there. It's just like, I can try and knit a nest, or I can just go have it. That's what I think is going to make people want to be in our businesses. That sense of ownership. So that's what we're trying to figure out.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of you. Next up, we have the leaders of Saturday Morning sharing their opinions on how to make this happen. So everyone stay tuned, and thank you, David, Colleen, and Rick. And
thank
to see all of you.
More of you soon.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see all of you.
Bye, guys. So I'm going to bring up Ishan Sherwood, who will be speaking with the guys from Saturday Morning.
Hey.
Hey.
Can we just get the three of them together every week? Because
Yeah.
it's pandemic times, right? What else are you doing?
I know. Okay. So next up, we have the leaders of Saturday Morning, who are going to talk about just everything right now. We're all going through a lot, and they just put out a letter this morning to the industry calling for change, but also being really optimistic about what can happen.
Yeah, the letter, I feel like it's very heartfelt, and it isn't the only sort of initiative we've seen from leaders in the industry, reaching out and saying this is a particular moment when, I feel like the pandemic was happening and everything's sort of a disaster, and so many people are losing their jobs, and then now there's been this groundswell support of Black Lives Matter, and paying attention to actual issues that many people have been talking about for a long time, but haven't actually seen much. We haven't seen much progress on. Yeah. And it's so interesting. It's like almost a reversal for me, where I feel so much more hopeful now than I did 5 weeks ago when everything was just pandemic. And now, yes, awful things are happening, but people are out in the streets. People are actually out in the streets. Yeah. And maybe this is a time when things will actually change. Yeah. Permanently. I mean, I guess
I'm super hopeful, but I'm also super scared that nothing's going to happen again. You
mean like every other time?
Yeah. So I don't know, but it does feel like one of those moments where change can happen, especially since through the pandemic, we've been able to see people rally really quickly. Mm-hmm. And, even with the Me Too movement, we saw a lot of change happen with that. So is this going to be the moment? I mean, it feels like it has to happen.
Yeah, it really does feel like there's so much evidence now where you can say all it actually really takes is will, because this is an industry that, I know, Anne, you hate this word, right? But it can pivot very hard, very quickly, if it wants to, or if the people who are signing checks say you have to, right? So all it really requires, not to solve it, but all it really requires in order for like organizations and agencies to prioritize something is for someone at the top to say that you have to do it.
Yeah, and we just heard from a bunch of the top leaders saying we have to do it, and we all have to be held accountable to what we say. So I think we can start with Saturday morning. I'm not sure if everybody's here yet, but I want to dig into this conversation now. So let's bring in Kwame, Geoff, and Jayanta.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Okay, so I'll leave it to you guys. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for everything.
Hey, guys. So just for those of you who are tuning in now and we're like, creative leaders, whatever, I'll wait for Saturday morning. I'm Misha Sherwood, Associate Creativity Editor here at Ad Age. I'm here with 3 of the co-founders of Saturday Morning, Kwame, Taylor-Hayford, Jana Jenkins, Geoff Edwards. Keith Cartwright will be on with us in just a moment. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I do want to sort of just start off by asking, like, the 4A's multicultural advertising internship program started 47 years ago. Every holding company, every agency that has more than like 20 employees has some sort of like D&I internship program. Every agency that's worth getting a job at has employee resource groups. And yet you look at C-suites, especially like creative C-suites across the entire industry, and like there's very little diversity. Why is that still the case after so long? Maybe we'll start with Geoff.
Why is it the case after so long? That's the question, the age-old question that we've been asking ourselves. The internship program in its origin, I think, was well intended. I think the issue, Yishan, is that those entities need support. An internship in itself is just going to allow for a vehicle to get people in, but the reality is, the promise of diversity and inclusion is that when those people are in, is to foster them and to allow them to grow within those organizations and ultimately be leadership and management. We have not seen that happen. As a matter of fact, since when I started in the industry a couple of decades ago, the numbers have trended down for African Americans in advertising, and it's sad to see. So, do we have the answers? No. Do we have the questions? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll build on that and say, I think the issue of diversity and inclusion, at least from a company perspective, needs to be attacked from lots of different vantage points. I think there's a recruitment and outreach sort of component. How do you reach out to communities of color and get young, old, experienced, inexperienced people excited and engaged and wanting to kind of lean into the opportunities that advertising has to provide? I think there's an internal sort of policies and procedures component. How are your, rules being written? How are your cultures being designed to be inclusive and to excite and entice people of color and people, to be honest, who are probably a great deal different than how most agencies are set up? Like, your culture has to embrace these talented people from a very different context in order for them to thrive and get promoted into leadership ranks. So you're not just fixing the pipeline problem, but you're also fixing, the problem of how people advance and stay engaged. And then finally, I think having it manifest through the work, having output that's reflective of the world as it is today. I think all those components need to work in concert to make advertising as a business overall, and to make each one of these companies a place where talent can thrive.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that, in agreement with Geoff and with Kwame, is these programs need to acknowledge, developing talent that rises above just mid-level and junior ranks. And I think, what we've heard a lot of executives say is, well, we have a great deal of, diversity and inclusion in sort of every place but the executive suite. And for some reason that almost seems like, or feels like it might be enough. But to Kwame and Geoff's point, we need to really create line of sight and give people the opportunities to develop and grow and be given opportunities to thrive in, areas above and beyond just, junior and mid-level roles.
Hey, just want to say hi, Keith Cartwright, for joining us. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's very obvious that when you look at D&I numbers sort of across the board, people of color, but women and like LGBTQ people as well, it's very much a pyramid, right? There's so many people at the bottom, very few at the top. So while you might be able to say like, we have 40% women at our agency, most of those people are working like lower at the bottom, right? And so it sounds like what you guys are saying is the industry has done a decent job of like building out pipeline, bringing in people, into the industry. But do you think are the efforts toward promotion, taking those people who start at the bottom and actually moving them up the ladder, and then also retention, changing internal culture so that people want to stay, are those lagging, or efforts like that lagging because those are more difficult maybe emotionally? Like, it's one thing to be like, well, there just aren't people of color here at the agency, and so we need to find them, versus we hired people and then they left because they didn't like it here.
Yeah, I think the two, if I may, I think the two are inextricably linked. I think the idea of bringing people in, those companies that bring people in of talent are also responsible for the development of those people. I'm going to say something really controversial. Ready?
Please.
Okay, here it goes. I personally do not believe in the idea of diversity and inclusion, and I'll tell you why. Because what is it saying? Diversity is inviting someone to the party, and inclusion is asking them to dance, right? So if we take that term, and if we dissect that term, if I'm being invited to the party, that means it's not my party. If I'm being invited to the party, it means that it's someone else's party, and I'm going in through the door, and I'm going to look into that party, and I don't know anybody there. That's an issue. That's issue number one. To go further with that analogy, being invited to dance means that is a power play, because I'm not doing it on my own. I'm actually being asked to do something only by someone else's will. And if Black people are watching right now, guess what? When music plays at a party, do we need an invitation to dance? We've never needed an invitation to dance. We dance because music is playing. So I believe that what it's set up to do is well-intended. I believe that it needs support of HR, leadership teams. It needs support of holding companies in order to be successful. Otherwise, it's just laying in the wind. And we're seeing what's happened after how many years? There's one executive per every agency network. That's wrong. And so if we want it to succeed, then we have to invest in its success.
Yeah, I think the other issue, to just add to what Geoff was saying, is internally, a lot of these agency leaders, as they bring in diverse talent, have to look at how they're allowing that talent to express themselves, and who they are. You bring in diverse cultures, and there's been all kinds of Harvard reviews and whatnot describing how it affects your bottom line in a positive way. It affects your culture in a positive way. So there's no question that it's good for business. The issue for inclusion is that when they get in there, people of color, myself included, they're not able to actually bring those experiences to bear and affect the business in the way that A, they know they can, and B, in contrast to all the work and everything that's been going on to date. So what's the point of bringing in someone of color if you're not going to let them share and use their diverse experiences in a way to bolster the business, but beyond that, express themselves? That's frustrating. So if I can't be my natural self here, if I can't provide and share with you my experiences, that, by the way, was an American experience, and I have to end up learning how to do the work and express myself in the way that you have and you are for centuries, it's a different language, and I don't want to speak it, and I don't want to do it, and I don't have time for it. I'm going to go somewhere that does get me, right? So I think it's these leaders who are well-intended, who want to bring people in, but don't really know and understand what they're bringing them into, and haven't taken stock in themselves and how they lead and what they're asking these individuals of color to do and how they're asking them to act. That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no surprise. It's no surprise to the people on this call.
Keith, that is such a great point, because you can come in and learn the language and still have they still have the same issues. So sometimes even knowing the language isn't enough. And one thing I want to do with this discussion, even though I know we're talking about agencies, is I want to broaden this a bit and make it inclusive of agencies, brands, and tech. Mm-hmm. That's the three prongs of this conversation: agencies first and foremost, brands secondarily, and tech overall. Because there are a lot of people like myself and others who are now entering into the client side, in-house agencies and tech and agencies, and these issues are just as pervasive in those areas as they are in agencies. It's a collective. But Keith, you make such an exceptionally great point.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Keith. And I think from my perspective, it's you build a company in your likeness, right? So you look at who's in the leadership in advertising, and there are a lot of people who have done what I would argue, is very challenging, because, both Keith and I are kind of in that process. It's hard to create something, and it's hard to make it viable, and it's hard to sustain it. And so naturally you're going to create it in a way that feels comfortable for you. So in a way, what we're asking is a bit unnatural, because we're asking people to be self-aware and to be open, and probably to be more connected to or reflective of the culture of the country and of the context as a whole, because the company needs to be flexible enough to allow for different voices, different experiences, different people to come in and to reshape it, and to ensure that, to Jayanta's point, they're not having to learn a language. They're coming into a culture that's fluent for them, and then they can feel comfortable, they can operate, and they can add tremendous amounts of value.
It feels a little bit like you're all saying that advertising is a bit like a microcosm of the immigrant experience in America. Like, you can come here, you just need to assimilate in order for us to actually accept you.
Right.
That's correct.
How does an industry overcome that hurdle, right? Like, what is it like? If you ask any senior creative, do you want your agency to more accurately reflect the country, and do you want the work to do that too? They'll say, of course I do. Mm-hmm. But why isn't that happening? Why isn't it working? And to Jayanta's point, like, what role are the clients and brands playing in what does or doesn't get made and put out the door?
I'll just go ahead, Geoff.
Okay, sure. I think that we can kind of give you a little point of view on what we think, but the reality is, I think that question is better posed for senior leadership currently in marketing, and for the people who the brands. I mean, I think that the brands that Saturday Morning works with, that we have the pleasure of working with, understand that they have a commitment, and that their brands themselves provide impact, right? So with that influence comes responsibility. And they have pretty much, and without going into the names of everybody that Saturday Morning works with, they've imposed upon, if not like demanded, that their agency partners have people that reflect the consumers that they're out looking at, right? So by doing that, the work is going to feel far more authentic. The people that create it are going to have a better experience, and it's just going to be better. It is no surprise at all that the best agencies in the world consistently, we talk about Wieden+Kennedy, Droga, and the list goes on, in marketing, not in tech and in brands, but in marketing, are also the most diverse. Why is that?
Yeah, I think the other point too to add is, the well-intentioned, good meaning agencies that want to help, right, are looking and putting out notes and looking for ways to attract more talent of color. We've all gotten those phone calls. I think, that sympathy is fine. Empathy is better. Sacrifice is hard, right? And there's a certain level of sacrifice that you need to do in order to do what Geoff is saying, which is, how do I bring in these people and create an environment for them, well, in order to do that, it's going to hurt, right? Sacrifice, by definition, is painful. You're going to have to change your processes. You're going to have to change the way you think about what creativity is. You're going to have to change the outlook on what your sort of agency trajectory was maybe originally built upon in order to be more inclusive to others. You have to make sacrifice. So if you're not willing to make that sacrifice, you fall into the category of well-intentioned humans who hope things turn out, but you're not really doing the hard work to actually bring people in and change it from the inside.
Yes, and yes to all of that. And I heard an expression or a quote that I really love, and it says, "The work will teach you how to do it." And I think that, to Keith and Geoff's point, the willingness to bring people in is one thing. Giving people the opportunity to shape and inform and listen to business to contribute at a high level is another. And I've been very fortunate over the last 4 years to work with founders, CMOs that have actually brought people like myself into the conversation to be impactful from an organizational standpoint, which has shaped a strategic point of view, which has shaped the end result of business, which has been beautiful.
To Geoff's point, like, you can only really speak to your own experiences. So I would like to talk about some of those personal experiences. All of you are senior people in this industry, and that is a relatively rare thing. It means that you've made it past some of these hurdles that we're talking about. So can you talk about, what has kept you in this industry? How close at any point have you come to deciding that you were just going to leave, that it wasn't worth it? What are some good and some negative experiences that you've had?
I'll jump off on this one. There has not been very much that has made me want to not be in this industry. And I'm very grateful for a lot of individuals across a lot of agencies and brands that have given me the opportunity to learn and lead at a very high level. And I think as I listen to my peers who are actually struggling and having a difficult time, what we have tried to do Saturday morning is create line of sight to help people understand that this can be an inclusive business and we can make a difference and create impact. But, failure is okay. I mean, I embrace failing and failure, but leaving this industry because of a few bad conversations or non-return phone calls, or people who aren't willing to create space for very talented people, or people who want the opportunity to grow and become, like others in this business. I don't think any of us would say there have been anything that would say we need to get out of this business or not want to be in it.
Yeah, and my simple add to what Jayanta said is, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that, we've had and are having incredible careers in this industry, and that's why we're so impassioned. That's why we're talking about this right now, this morning with you, is because the events that have happened in the world have created a moment, and in that moment, it's created a dialogue, and that dialogue allows us to talk about how we can maybe solve the legacy of injustice in marketing. Today, I find myself a creative executive that really, really enjoys the business and what Jayanta said, but really, really enjoys where we're going through the power of technology. If you were to ask me that as a young creative, and over the course of the last 2 weeks, been receiving a lot of emails, text messages from young creatives, I don't know that I would come into the industry now. It would be a very difficult decision, and I'll tell you why. Because if I had the choice of either being an artist, being a designer, or going into the tech industry, spending time in a garage and coming out with the next TikTok or Snapchat, I think that would be something that maybe I would decide to do, just given the fact that there's an incredible amount of freedom in that. The industry has not performed in a way that is as conducive or as inviting to young creatives today. And I think we have to solve that. This is a business conversation we're having. It's not an impassioned kind of, how do we make it better for Black people currently? No, it's dealing with the cause and not the condition. And so I think that we need to try and make this industry something that is exciting for people to want to be in again. And diversity plays a huge, huge, huge part in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I fully agree with that, Geoff. I think the industry is exciting, dynamic. There've been very few moments where I felt like I didn't want to be in the industry. I think let's not mince words. I think it's very hard to be in the industry. I think it's very hard to be an executive in advertising at the senior level, period. Even harder if you're a person of color. And I think harder still when you look for examples of maybe leadership that you might want to emulate or aspire to. Because, in the history of business, there's been one archetype of the CEO. And let's be honest, he doesn't look like anything like anyone on this chat this morning, which is unfortunate, but there's a history of that. So I think what I get excited about is how can we model different kinds of leadership? How can we start to champion leaders who come from different backgrounds or demonstrate different skill and can help build what I would call the companies of the future to inspire, lots of other young, talented people of color and women to get into creative business. I feel really fortunate that I got to work with Hamdi over at Chobani, who's an incredible human being and a leader who leads in a very different way, I think, than most leaders that you would see at large companies. And for me, it's that example and many others that I feel we need more of, to really help motivate and inspire people to see and achieve their dreams.
Yeah, I think the thing that is scariest to me is not the people on this call. I think, we are a part of a small group of African Americans who jumped in this business as almost pioneers because there weren't a lot of people here when we got here. That's why we all know each other. The thing that's most frightening is the next generation.
Yeah.
Because they see it and they may not come.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like a place that wants them. And that's the thing that's most frightening to us, but at the same time, I think, and I want to say this out loud, there's a reckoning that is about to happen with our business if they don't get it together soon.
Great.
Clients will be before clients, the street has spoken and they're not having it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so our clients, the businesses, are taking notice and they're taking marketing and advertising to bear and saying, listen, get this right or you're out. And we'll find other ways. If these agencies can't figure out how to be more diverse soon, and this is not a wait conversation, this is a now conversation. If they can't figure that out with all that's going on in the world, then everything that this industry gets, it deserves. They've had so much time. We've talked about this for so long. And now is time for a reckoning. We have to fix it now. And to boot, making sure that, again, this younger generation, who's watching, by the way, doesn't say to themselves, why would I possibly want to go into advertising and marketing if it looks like this?
Yeah, I want to say this again, because I'm going to hammer this point. Agencies, brands, and tech. Agencies, brands, and tech, because there's an in-house component that, like I said, I've become aware of that's amazing, can be rewarding. There's the tech component, which has the in-house brands, and there's agencies. This conversation is inclusive of that paradigm.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And Gianta, in that list that you mentioned, each and every one of those has work to do. I mean, we moved from San Francisco 5 years ago to LA. And let me tell you, the Bay Area needs help. And they know they need help and they're trying. The industry is what we're talking about this morning. And the brands are ultimately where this starts, right? They write the check. So if they mandate, to Keith's point, that this be solved, then that begins to start the conversation. I want to bring up something though, because as marketers, you know, our duty every day when we come in after our coffee is to solve problems. That is our job, and we're better than anybody in the world at it. And that's why we have the jobs that we have and do the work that we do. So we know how to solve problems. We know how to solve problems. We know how to solve hard problems. If you look at Kat Gordon and 3% Conference, when she started the conference, it was called 3%. Everybody asked why, and then we found out, okay, that's the amount of female executives that exist currently in marketing. And she's already ballooned it to double digits, north of double digits. And she's done it in a very short amount of time. My point is, if you want to have this happen, it will happen. I think the question that we have to ask senior leadership, the holding companies and everybody else is, do you want it to happen?
So we are talking with the co-founders of Saturday Morning. I'm Ishan Sherwood, Associate Creativity Editor here at Ad Age. We've got Kwame Taylor-Hayford, Geoff Edwards, Jonathan Jenkins, and Keith Cartwright. Our group here today is kind of a self-selection, right? You have all stayed in the industry, but we know, I'm sure you all know specific people who, you know, have left for one reason or another. Can any of you point to maybe a resource that you had access to, or some advice that you got, or a person in your life who, like in this industry, who was instrumental in your current success, like in order to get you here? Like what should someone coming in early in the industry as like an entry-level person be looking for or keep in mind in order to stay in it and succeed?
Wow. Who wants to lead that?
You know what? I'll try to take it on and jump in, gentlemen. I've had a lot of amazing mentors and support over the last 15 years. And, you know, I think each experience that I've had has built and unlocked a way for me to look at the business and how to participate and create impact. And I just think for me, it's the mistakes, the growth, and the accolades, all the things that you would kind of want in this business, so you can actually prove to yourself first and foremost, and everyone else, that this is something that you love and you want to, you know, create a pivot. Actually, here's where I'm going to go with this. I've taken all of the experiences and the great things that I've had, and now, you know, I want to convert that into building teams, organizations, and creating support and impact from an internal perspective, which then can help the work itself. And the person that really, really helped me sort of understand this like no other in my career was Jack Dorsey. Jack, who of course is the co-founder of Twitter and of Square, is such an amazing point of view on business, compassion, empathy. And I think just probably of late would be the person I would identify as been the most impactful in my career of the last few years. But overall, you know, that journey of all the people that have supported me has given me this line of sight to how to shape cultures, internal cultures, which then impact business, and then hopefully create this interdependency that doesn't have to, you know, be dependent on one perspective of how we look at the world, which is why global is in the front of my title now. But you know, I'm very fortunate, and I'm very, you know, I will big up Jack Dorsey as someone that has really impacted the way that I look at myself as a business leader that happens to use creativity to operationalize business objectives, you know, massively.
We've got a question from Anne Christine on social media. How can or should agencies change to improve the experiences for C-suite leaders of color and actually allow their voices and leadership to shine through? And are there any specific examples you can share?
Keith, well, there's not a lot of C-suite leaders of color. So I think the first big thing that these companies can do is bring in more, and not just at a C-suite level, at a board level, right? Those are where actual changes are happening. You know, I think symbolism and representation, and people seeing that symbolism and representation throughout any organization is meaningful. I think it says a lot about that organization and what they believe and how they see the world. So the first step is bringing them in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we're still at that phase before we can even start to have a conversation about how to inspire them once they're there. You know, I think, you know, I'm a strong believer in giving people the room and space to do what it is you hired them to do, right? If you hire people who are smarter than you, then that's a natural occurrence. If you hire people who have more open and diverse experiences than you do, that's a natural occurrence. So, you know, I point back at the, you know, it's not about us, my opinion, about us finding ways to inspire those who are in the seat and in the chair. They're already inspired because they had to kill themselves to get there. They had to work like dogs to get in that seat in the first place. They don't need the inspiring. It's actually the people who brought them in who might need inspiring from the person of color who's in the C-suite chair, right? And to let them know and to demonstrate that this is a good thing, and we need more of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and thank you for the person who posed it. It's a difficult one as well, and I'll explain my point. Is let's just look at the data. I believe at last count, there's a little over 3%, maybe 4% African American in marketing at the executive level, right? So when you consider that, and you consider marketing across the country, first across the country, then globally, everyone is kind of like, it's a gold rush, right? We're kind of trying to find if we can bring those types of people into our organizations. And so the point I'm making is this: is just the numbers just don't work. Percentage-wise, it just doesn't work. Just because, to Keith's point, there aren't enough African-American level executives currently. That's an issue. So my challenge to agencies and companies and tech companies and brands is to maybe look outside of your walls and to bring people in from other organizations and different disciplines, because it's all about problem solving and it's all about kind of like coming out with a great creative product. My background was different than marketing before I got into it. I kind of, like many of us, stumbled my way into advertising, and then I just fell in love with it and stuck with it. But that would be a challenge, just based on the fact the sheer numbers of it just don't add up.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll maybe two thoughts from me. One is, and you hear this a lot, but I think we really need to have agency leadership who are comfortable with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. The point is, you're going to bring in these people who are not at all like you. They're very different backgrounds, different experience, different ways of leading, and that's going to make you uncomfortable. But I think if you're truly committed, you will be okay with handing over the reins and okay with making space for that discomfort. Because if it feels completely natural, then in a way you're not doing the job. Because fundamentally things do need to change and do need to shift. And then I think the second point, and Jayanta touched on this, is this idea of allowing people the space, the room, the respect to fail. Yeah. I think that's really important. I think things will feel different. Things may not go exactly as planned, but understand that you're on a journey. And while you may have a few bumps in the road, it's important that you have the commitment to see it through, because on the other end of that, there is a lot more opportunity, potential, growth, but there will be a valley in between those two sort of peaks. And I think the commitment you have is what's going to allow you to get to that other valley.
That's great.
Yeah, I find it interesting that a lot of the things that you all are saying that, you know, people at agencies need to do are the things that are the very sort of selling proposition that the industry tells young people and tells like college students and people in portfolio school that they'll be able to do when they get here, right? Like, come on in here, and then you can like run around and make mistakes and fuck things up, and then maybe make something really interesting. And like, I'm not going to look over your shoulder because I'm a cool creative director who like lets you like sit in a room and cook up your own ideas, and you do the thing I hired you to do in the first place. And yet it seems like that is not happening for people of color in this industry.
Well, can I build on that a little bit, Ishan, please? We don't, as African-American people in the industry, and everyone knows who's watching, we don't have the luxury of failure. We just don't. Yeah. The principle of failing harder, the principle of being able to have the creative freedom to try things, and if you don't make it, just try again, right? If the idea is bad, throw it in the garbage, take it out, roll out the paper, and repurpose it. We don't have that. We have to be excellent. When we go up, our batting percentage has to be over 700. When we're shooting, our shooting percentage has to be over 80% and 90% from the line, no exceptions. And it's why you look at this panel and you find that we are all multifaceted. I'm an art director that writes. I'm a hybrid digital, traditional. I have to. I don't have the choice not to. So the people that are coming into the industry with our similar background have a very, very, very high expectancy of being able to come in and be proficient in a lot of things and not have the luxury, let's say, of failure.
But one thing I want to say, sorry, Keith.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I want to say, because Geoff and Kwame, you're all absolutely right. You come in and your shooting percentage has to be Jordan to the third power. And the failure thing becomes a lot more painful because of what you're trying to prove to yourself to sort of, show others of your value, your inherent value. But then you get to a place, I think, which, is, let's talk about this, where you become so accomplished that then there's the inverted sort of response from people, which is, we don't know what to do with someone at your expertise level because all the opportunities you're above and beyond. Yeah. So you on one hand, the failure thing is real and you should be allowed that. You achieve, and then all of a sudden you've gone above and beyond what opportunities are available as an African American in this industry. And I think it's a really interesting thing that we haven't had the privilege of talking about. And it is a privilege to be in this place, I suppose, but it is a problem, So on both ends, how do you win if you can't get into the industry and prove yourself and be around the people who you can learn from, scale up, make impact, and then get to a place where you're just almost at the point of being able to be at that executive level, not quite enough, but then you're too proficient to be in anything else. It's an interesting problem that I think, it's worth discussing a little bit.
Yep. That's a great point, Janta. And, it brings up something I learned early on. Creativity, here's the irony. Creativity is a series of mistakes that lead to an idea, right? Mm-hmm. You go through that journey until you find that thing that's right? So in and of itself, how you get to a good idea is multiple failures that lead to something that, if it's good, it probably doesn't really make sense and wasn't what you'd expect. Mm-hmm. So it's unexpected. All of that, and then in line with what Geoff and Jayanta are saying, this ideology of having to be perfect, right? Having to always, think like them and not like yourself flies in the face of the creative process.
Right.
How can I go in as a creative person and say to myself, I need to be like them, but at the same time, you want me to think on my own and come to you with ideas that are untraditional or unexpected. Fear gets in the way because you don't want to mess up, right? So there's a lot of confidence that's required from people of color to say, I just have to show these things because I think it's right. And then there's a lot of confidence that has to be held by the creative directors on the other side to say, this is different and it's maybe not my taste or something I would do, but there's something here. Mm-hmm. That is, on the interior, the problem that we have to face with our business, because it's a business that has no science. If we were mathematicians or engineers and we could, everything was quantifiable, okay, that conversation is a lot easier. You either solved it or you didn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we're not accountants. We're creative people who walk through the world asking the question, what if? But if what if is scary because you don't want to fail, you stop asking that question.
That's right.
I think that's a really important point, Keith. Just, affording every person of color who's creative the same respect, the same opportunity to fail and to put things out there that don't work, and to not feel like they're going to be penalized and not feel like they're representing their entire race because of a piece of work that they've put forward. I think it's a tricky thing to balance, but I think it's essential if there's going to be more success and more opportunity.
That's right.
I think that's right. It can't be a situation where, you know, a young art director named Keith Cartwright brings an idea that didn't jive, was off strategy, and the answer to that is, see what happens when I gave him this assignment. So the next person doesn't get a chance. It has to be to look at it case by case and look at the individual as a creative or as a creative leader or account or whichever it is, and make it about the work.
Yeah, and also to that point, we're talking very sort of individualistically about the process of being creative. But as leaders in organizations and leading a group of people who don't look like us, you know, there's a comfort level that, you know, of having to sort of get through as well, and helping people even get comfortable with the notion of having a leader that they've never had in the room that looks like them. You know,
huge.
Yeah, and I think as all of us have gotten into different levels in our careers in this industry, that is, you know, a new reality, you know, and it sort of goes into some other issues of, you know, well, is this, it goes into a bunch of issues that are based on stereotypes about how you show up and how people feel because they have an African-American presence in the room, be it a woman or a male, and the perceived aggression that just comes with having darker skin, which doesn't exist for me in my head. But there's just, you know, I think there's the notion of having come into the room with ideas that are different and having to get people who don't look like me to sort of go, I don't get it, so does it make it good? And then having to sort of really over index on sort of a point of view, and then hoping it doesn't fail because you've just put yourself on the spot. You know, you made yourself vulnerable. And then as leadership, walking into a room of people that don't look like you and really using the balancing act to bring people in, to be inclusive. And as I've always liked to do with the work that I've been a part of and the people I do it with, is celebrate our similarities and get people in the space of not thinking of other or this is more Black because it's that. It's all one big sort of conversation, but it's real.
I'll say one more quick thing. I just want to throw this story out. When I was coming up as a creative director, I got an email from a creative director who I admired, but I didn't know him. And we had just come out with some work. And it was Jim Riswold. And he sent me an email, and I still have it today. And it says, you finally got something wrong, right? And I keep that email to remind myself that there, in a field that's creative, that's based on tastes and opinions, what's right? Right? If it drives emotion and it moves people, what's right? Why is your right better than my right? Right? And sometimes it's important for us to think, man, how can we get this wrong in a way that'll be audacious and wake people up? And that's hard for Black people. I'm going to say Black people specifically, because this conversation is affecting us the most.
Yeah, you know, and Keith, you actually remind me of a conversation I had when I was basically told, why are you working so hard? Why are you taking this so seriously? You know, and it wasn't a understanding, to your point, that one, we are working incredibly hard to prove ourselves. Two, you start getting into a rhythm where you see you're making a difference and having impact. And then others around you become very sort of kind of off-put because, you know, who do you think you are? You know, like, and it just, you know, you work through it, but you're right. I've evaluated on such a different paradigm, and all we want to do is thrive, have fun, do the work we've seen, the Doyle Danes and whomever's. We can even take it outside of advertising. We can take it by architecture, art, whatever the case may be. This industry is absolutely amazing. I've had more fun in being able to be Jayanta Jenkins within this industry in ways that I've never imagined. It's been so rewarding. And at this point, it is my hope, my desire, my purpose to have others that look like me, create a line of sight, support organizations to empower all people, but to give us the ability to continue to scale and thrive, because our culture deserves it, our industry deserves it, and the world deserves it.
Yeah, that's great. And Ishan, it's interesting as we talk, and Jay, I 100% agree with what you and Keith said, is what's happening in the world right now, what's happening in the streets around the country and around the world is absolutely felt within the walls of everyone's agency who's viewing right now, our companies, organizations, and so forth. It's just different. But the topic at its root, at its core, is the same, which is acceptance. The topic at its core is the same as just wanting to contribute and to show our talents and to have a lot of fun and to make things and to build brands smartly. And that shouldn't be going against the current. It's a shame that we're taking everyone's morning to talk about a topic that is age old, that has been around now for way too long, as Keith mentioned earlier. We got to get past it. And we know we can get past it. So we've got to figure out, and we've got to do it quickly, how we do it.
That's right.
Is the inability to be allowed to fail, is that indicative of how D&I or diversity hires are maybe even on a subconscious level still viewed as essentially risky? You bring someone in and then you can say, hey, look, I got a bad idea from the black guy from a non-traditional background. This is what you get. And it's a bit like Glass Cliff, right? We put a woman in charge, right? Because we knew everything was falling apart anyway.
Yeah.
And now I have a reason that I don't have to hire a woman as a CEO in the future.
It's so funny you say that, because I think maybe that was the wisdom for a while, but you know what? The people aren't going to have that anymore.
That's right.
We're just at a point in time where the expectations are so different. And we've talked a lot about this, but yes, things need to change. Things need to change within the existing structures and companies that are out there. But I think this is going to inspire all new companies, and all new ventures that are built with more fluency and more acceptance, and a lot more opportunity for people who don't look and sound the same. And I personally get very excited about that. I think everyone on this call, I know, is excited about that. It's a lot of the reason why we came together to work on this issue. We felt we had a lot of skills that we had gained over years and years working in advertising, and we felt we could put them to work to help move the needle on shifting perceptions and create some new value, not just for the culture at large, but also for ourselves. And I think, to me, that's an important piece of this, is how can we inspire more people to take that risk to become owners and leaders of their own entities and their own businesses, supported, of course, by allies that we'll have sort of all over. But I think the ownership piece is key. It's getting to a place where you're able to create your own future. I think it's going to be really important to accelerating a lot of what we're talking about now.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree. I would add to that what Kwame's saying, that we also need some hardcore sacrifices. Keith, I think you mentioned earlier sacrifice, and I love that, because I think that what it says is that someone's going to make a pretty strong commitment. I'll give you two examples. One is in entertainment, and one is in tech. For entertainment, remember a couple of years ago with hashtag #OscarSoWhite, where Hollywood was acknowledging the fact that, for years it had misrepresented us in storytelling, and also with the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences. And what happens? J.J. Abrams goes on stage and he basically says that Bad Robot, his company, is going to be committed to 50% of African-American people and gender equality in front and behind the camera. And guess what? He did it. We saw the world's first Black stormtrooper. He put it into storytelling. If you ever go to Bad Robot, which, by the way, I went there about a year ago when I was interviewing, it is like, you feel like it's the world come to life. It is as diverse as they come. And so he's not just saying it, he's walking the talk. So there's an example of sacrifice. And then the other is Alexis Ohanian. You know, here you have somebody who, you know, the company that he co-founded, he's going to give up his board seat specifically for somebody of African descent. And that is a big, bold move. I have a feeling Serena had something to do with that, just between us. But regardless, I love the fact that that sacrifice was made, because what it signals to the world is that we're not going to pay lip service to this anymore. We're going to come up with goals, and we're going to walk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
You guys, there I am. I'm just gonna. It's a very simple, short statement. An investment and not an experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to put it. You know, you've both mentioned sacrifice, but also talked about, you know, we sort of start with the baseline of there is a business case for diversity, obviously, and I like the notion of that sacrifice turning into, or actually being, an investment, right? Like, you know, Geoff, you mentioned Bad Robot, like they haven't suffered at all, nor has the output suffered, nor has the audience suffered from like them deciding that they're actually going to do the right thing. Like we got better work out of it, and they're making a lot of money. They're doing fine. That's
exactly right. If you know, Keith, you reference this all the time, but we've been asking for decades, and so it sounds like the ask isn't being heard. The leadership is not reflecting the ask or the desire. So let's appeal to the business. Let's appeal to the pocketbook, because that's what happens in the United States, right? It makes business sense. Diversity makes business sense. Gender equality makes business sense. So let's do it. Let's do it.
That's right.
All right. Thanks, guys. This has been a great conversation. I hope to continue having it in as many media and venues as possible. Again, this has been a conversation with Saturday Morning. My name is Ishan Sherwood, Associate Creativity Editor here at Ad Age, and I have been here with the founders of Saturday Morning, Geoff Edwards, Keith Cartwright, Janda Jenkins, and Kwame Taylor-Hayford. Thanks so much.
Thank you.